Assalamu alaikum, it's Faisal here and welcome to module 1, day 1 of the purpose program. So what we're going to be going through today is why is purpose important anyway. So we've got a lot to cover, so I'll get straight into it inshallah. So we're going to start with the fight for your most prized resource. What happens when there's no purpose? How did all of this happen to us? Distracting ourselves with pleasure. Revisiting the world we live in today. What can we learn about rats from purpose, or about purpose, sorry. Are you a jasad or a jellyfish? The purpose of purpose and your objective, take care of yourself. So as you can see, it's quite a heavy session, but again, in the interest of laying down context and giving you the kind of the meat and bones to start off with, as I said, they'll get lighter as we go into it, inshallah. So let's get started. The fight for your most prized resource. So this was a quote I want to reference. This was a lady called Bo Ren. She was a director in a startup in Silicon Valley. Now, my parents were tasked with the job of survival, and I with self-actualization. The immigrant generational gap is real. What a luxury it is to search for purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. So what do you think of that statement? So obviously it's a good statement. It's perhaps relevant. It's maybe you can't argue with it. I wanted to address this as the first point before we do anything else. Minute 1 of day 1. This phrase or this is a myth, because if we feel that this is something that's a nice to do, then we're going to fail. It's a surefire way to failure, because naturally, human nature is to prioritize only those things which are a must. So if we have this mindset, it's a luxury, we're in this fortunate position, it's a privilege. I mean, yes, it is those things, but it's not just that. This is a absolute priority. Because why? What is our most prized resource? Is it money? Is it our health? Is it our house? Is it our family? Is it our knowledge and our skills? No, it's our time. It's the most precious resource that we have, and it's fast running out. And above all, you might think, this is about purpose, this is about meaning, this is about fulfillment. Yes, it is about all those things. Ultimately, what it's about helping you to spend your short time on this earth as best as you can to achieve the objectives that Allah originally intended for you, and to free you up from the noise, from shaitan, from whispers, etc. Everywhere you look, forces are pulling time away from you, and it is too important and too valuable to squander it. To know why God created you, to reset and understand the world, so you are able to make the correct decisions and feel truly fulfilled. This is not a luxury, this is a basic right for everyone. Everyone deserves not to waste their time. Hasan al-Basri said, "Son of Adam, you are nothing but a number of days. Whenever each day passes, a part of you has gone." So, think about that. Secondly, Imam Ali said, the world is a transitory abode, not a permanent abode, and the people in it of two sorts. One who sells his soul and ruins it, and then there's one who ransoms his soul and frees it. So which one are we currently? Okay, so let's get into it. What happens when there is no purpose? And I want to start off with this experiment, so a rat experiment. And there's a couple of others coming, so as you can see, this is rat experiment number 1. So this is a guy called Dr. John Calhoun, who did this experiment called Universe 25 between 1968 and 1973. And what he tried to do through the behavior of a colony of mice is to attempt to explain human societies. So what he did was he created an ideal world in which hundreds of mice would live and reproduce. More specifically, what he did was he built something called the paradise of mice. This was a specifically designed space where the rodents had an abundance of food and water, as well as a large living space. So in the beginning, he placed 4 pairs of mice that in a short space of time began to reproduce, resulting in their population growing rapidly. However, after 315 days, their reproduction began to decrease significantly. When the number of rodents reached 600, a hierarchy was formed between them, and then the so-called wretches began to appear. the larger rodents began to attack the group, with the result that many of the males began to collapse psychologically. As a result, the females did not protect themselves and in turn became very aggressive towards their young. As time went on, the females showed more and more aggressive behavior, isolation elements, and a lack of reproductive mood. There was a low birth rate and at the same time an increase in mortality in younger rodents. Then a new class of male rodents appeared, the so-called beautiful mice. So the beautiful mice refused to mate with the females or to fight for their space. All they cared about was food and sleep. At one point, the beautiful males and the isolated females made up the majority of the population. Now, according to John Calhoun, he said that there was a death phase and it consisted of 2 stages, the first death and the second death. The first death was characterized by the loss of purpose in life beyond mere existence. So they had no desire to mate, no desire to raise young, or to establish a role within society. As time went on, juvenile mortality reached 100% and reproduction reached 0. Among the endangered mice, homosexuality was observed, and at the same time, cannibalism increased, despite the fact that there was plenty of food. 2 years after the start of the experiment, the last baby of the colony was born, and by 1973, he had killed the last mouse in Universe 25. So Dr. Calhoun repeated the same experiment 25 more times, and each time the result was the same. So Calhoun's scientific work has been used as a model for interpreting social collapse, and his research serves as a focal point for the study of urban sociology. So it's really, really interesting, right? We can witness direct parallels to what he saw in this experiment to what we're seeing in society today. We're seeing, obviously, very weak, feminized men, maybe the beautiful mice or the beautiful men equivalent, and who have little to no skills and no protection instincts. And then we're seeing overly agitated and aggressive females with no maternal instincts. And so what his experiment shows us is that a lack of purpose ultimately, long term, leads to the breakdown and collapse of society. So this was a very good quote. I thought it was very relevant. The human being cannot live in a condition of emptiness for very long. If he is not growing towards something, he does not merely stagnate. The pent-up potentialities turn to morbidity and despair, and eventually into destructive activities. So you saw that in the mice experiment, where there's plenty of food, but then they turn to cannibalism and things like that. So that was by Rollo May. So problems stemming from a lack of purpose. So the problem with purpose today is that we actually don't realize that a lot of our problems stem from a lack of this. So what we do is that we attribute the problems that we're facing to something else. So we're tired, oh, I'm just fatigued, oh no, I'm just burnt out, I'm just this, I'm just that. And so we don't ever then address the core issue, the root issue. Whereas the root cause is centered in us being heedless and misaligned with who we really are and why we were really created. So what I did was, as part of this process, etc., I interviewed around 50 people. And here's what it can look like if you're lacking purpose in your life for an extended period of time. So these are the kind of things that people said. Just a lack of focus in life, feeling lost and stuck, having a poor faith and the loss of Iman. A word that was used quite often was drift syndrome. So just going with the flow, I'm just drifting. A pattern of frustration and resentment in relationships. So sabotage or breakdown or destruction or even close relationships. I guess this is a frustration just pouring out. Then there's a lot of escapism of grown adults who are not taking responsibility. They need to be mollycoddled or parented. So delaying of adulthood. So things like gaming and just doing this kind of stuff where it means that they don't have to take responsibility. Fear of abandonment or difficulty, avoiding action or avoiding pain. So burnout, apathy, lethargy. A fear of poverty, that was another common one, and struggle. So just not wanting to do anything that risks their current situation. Lack of agency, so poor decision making and just confusion, no direction, focus or vision, being foggy, so lack of clarity, being very short-termist and not willing to wait. So again, I don't know if you resonate with any of this stuff, but this is the kind of stuff that people were saying. Chronic fatigue and languishing. So languishing is kind of where you're just, again, going with the flow. You don't really know what you're doing. You're just biding time. Suffering from setbacks and an inability to get back on track quickly. So, where people are in a slump and you kind of can't get out of bed. A lot of people would say that's depression symptoms or things like that. But that's another thing that was quite clear to see. So guilting is interesting. A lot of this stuff is not just how it impacts you personally, but how it impacts your relationships. So guilting and shaming others, again, this is where resentment and stuff kicks in, where you're unhappy with your own life, so you're taking out on loved ones. Blaming others for your own shortcomings, being resentful and angry, being very ego driven, and then status is everything, and that's because that's the only thing that gives you some comfort. Over reliance or over expectation, and then disappointment in people, being unjust and having unrealistic expectations. Inability to establish boundaries, voice standards and needs in a relationship, either being a gaslighter themselves or being prone to being gaslit. So trauma, depression, mental health issues, suicidal thoughts, lack of motivation, leading to like weight gain, obesity. So there was people who are just not in a good state, just because again, no motivation. Turning to consumerism or materialism for self-worth, getting addicted to the high of consuming or superficial goals. So not all these people were, some of the people that I spoke to were very high achievers. But they were addicted to the high of, I need to get my supercar. I need to get the next house. I need to have this. I need to have that. I need to have this. They were just head down and really, really deeply entrenched within superficial kind of goals, or consumerist type of goals, as opposed to anything deeper. Impulsivity and inconsistency, a loss of motivation to be productive and to serve others. So basically they weren't humble. They were kind of, and not all service driven. It was very egocentric. Why should I? They need to do it for me. Comparison, jealousy and envy. This is where the whole social media comparison thing comes along. Poor for self-esteem and judging their own self-worth by achievements alone. So again, rather than just again the accumulation of more, essentially. Fight Club. I actually watched that recently again. This was a very good quote. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs that we hate so we can buy stuff we don't need. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. Again, very interesting. I mean, it's interesting, the reference even to the Great Depression or the Great War is that, at least for those people who were going through that was they had to rally around and survive, and that might create a siege mentality and stuff. Whereas here we've got living in maybe in a privileged era time, luxury, all that kind of stuff. There's not really anything just keeping us going. It's just very again, superficial is the word that keeps coming up. So I thought this was a very, very good metaphor, actually, of what it looks like when we kind of lack purpose. And so this is a bit of artwork that was in Vienna, and it's a piece of art called "Can't Help Myself," so by some Chinese artists. And what it was, it's a robot arm that was programmed to try and contain the hydraulic fluid that was deliberately leaking out, that was required to keep itself running. So when it first started, there was only a little bit of liquid that was pouring out, and so it would scoop it up, and then it would keep going. If too much of the fluid escapes, it would cause the robot to malfunction and die. So it is desperately trying to pull it back to continue to fight for another day. But they also gave the robot the ability to do happy dances to spectators. So when it was first launched in 2016, it danced around, spending most of its time interacting with the crowd, since it could quickly pull back the small spillage. But as time went on, the leakages got bigger and bigger. But a few years later, it began to look tired and hopeless, as there just wasn't enough time to dance anymore. It was frantically trying to scoop up all the fluid, because obviously otherwise its own survival depended on it. It couldn't entertain itself anymore. And so the spill grew and grew over time. basically its purpose was one thing, which was its own survival, but it prioritized another until it was too late. And so it lived its last days in a never-ending cycle between sustaining life and then bleeding out. Obviously, if you look at how they created the fluid, it was designed to look like blood. And eventually, it came to a halt and died in 2019. So, and also it was programmed to live out this fate, and no matter what it did or how hard it tried, there was just no escaping this eventuality. So it slowly bled out until the day it ceased to move forever. And it was then posthumously renamed Couldn't Help Myself. So for me, this is again a very interesting thing, because the robot arm, it kind of represents our state of flux and our lack of purpose in life, right? So what we're doing is that we're entertaining ourselves, we're doing things that are not essential to our purpose, and we're killing ourselves spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, in an attempt to just sustain the status quo. And so we forget that we've got a shelf life, we've got a different purpose as well, but we're prioritizing the wrong thing. So by us doing mindless work and entertaining ourselves in the night, we're just not really doing ourselves justice, and that's going to lead us to a sad end, like this poor robot. This is again another example. Gen Z is obviously the young generation, between teens and 20s, and a 2021 survey from Indeed, which is a jobs website, showed that Gen Z workers were reporting the highest rates of burnout at 59%, and reporting, so basically 47% of Gen Z said that they were completely burnt out. Interestingly, millennials were also next. So this current young generation of Gen Z and millennials are already super burnt out, whereas this should be their peak. This should be the time that they got the most energy and most lively and stuff like that. So this stuff is all very aligned, or these parallels are happening for a reason. So with all this, it's all well and good to talk about doom and gloom, but how did all of this actually happen? The real power of the West is not located in its economic muscles and technological might. Rather, it resides in the power to define. The West defines what is, for example, freedom, progress, civil behaviour, law, tradition and community, reason, mathematics and science, what is real and what it means to be human. The non-Western civilizations simply have to accept these definitions or be defined out of existence. So that's why Ziauddin Sardar, in a book called Orientalism. So for me, this is an amazing quote, and it really hits the nail on the head. Because if someone else is defining what your purpose is, what it means to be human, what you need, you're playing to those rules. You're playing to rules that aren't actually true, or what aren't actually aligned with who you really are. And so you're basically swimming against the tide. You're going against the current. And so this is why you're fatigued. You can do it for a while, but if you keep doing it year after year after year, it's going to take its toll. But so that's the first thing, that you've been missold. That's the first thing. This is a very recent article, actually, to World Economic Forum, and what they said is that, look, to have a good life, it doesn't have to be happy, it doesn't have to be meaningful. Which again is it's interesting that they're pushing that, which is opposite, which is not true at all. Like I said, having studied this intently for a long time, that's absolutely not true. So what they're promoting, again, trying to validate your your current state, what they're saying is that you don't need happiness and you don't need meaning for a good life. They're saying, you just need psychological richness. That's what their research is saying, as a measure of life value. So that means new experiences. So they think, that new experience is more important than actually having meaning or finding happiness or anything like that. And it's just a coincidence, or is it, that this plays into the Western conception of what, the good life. Because their version of new experiences is literally what the world looks like today. This unfettered agenda of, having unlimited choice. It doesn't matter who you're with and what you do, and there's no accountability. Do what thou wilt, and that's all new experiences driven. And so this is a telltale sign of a highly individualistic world, which has no higher purpose other than to satisfy one's own desires. Does this really lead to mankind flourishing? The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. To him, the walls of his prison are invisible and he believes himself to be free. I think, everyone today is a victim of this. And none are more so hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And we all think that we're free, we've got, all that stuff, but it's sad to say that, unfortunately, that's not the case. So this stuff, it goes back, so it starts young. Even when you think back when we were a child, we all say, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? But the thing is, if you ask the child, what do you want to be when you grow up? It gets the child thinking what they want to be instead of who. And that automatically gets them thinking commercially or from a worldly perspective. It pre-frames them for a life dedicated to whatever career they end up choosing. And then the identity or the worldview is predicated upon it. Right, so that sets them up for failure. And that the only way of being accepted or loved is by being something valued high in society. So the status seed is planted at this point. Because obviously what a child wants, and we'll come on to this in a future module, what the child wants more than anything is praise and to be liked. And so if a child says, I want to be a doctor or astronaut or president, they're going to be liked and praised and this and that, and then they're going to want to do that more. So if they fail, then failure, depression. If they succeed, then they think, then that comes with its own issues. So for some, it panics them that they don't have any idea what they want to do, unlike everyone else seems to. So they clutch at straws and say anything that seems acceptable. I remember when I was going for legal interviews and stuff, they would always ask me, what they were saying, you haven't shown a commitment to the legal profession, because I had done so many different types of jobs, but because what they had seen or what they were expecting is from the age of 14 or 15 or 16 for me to have done summer vacation schemes in law firms, and that's what I was up against, right? So it's interesting. And this was a really good quote, I thought. By the time we're old enough to contemplate our own identity, we already have one. By then, the way that we see the world is framed by our prior conditioning. That conditioning informs every choice that we make, even the choice to rebel against that conditioning. So the point of it is that at the age of 16 or 18 or, these things, but when we have to make some key decisions for our lives, we don't really know enough. We don't have enough data points. We don't really, have enough experiences, but yet we've already been essentially given an identity by society and by how it's all set up. So that kind of then prevents us from thinking beyond that. Knowing what you want to do in life as a child is the rarest exception. Those who do are often from privileged backgrounds or have been groomed towards a certain path, but the brain doesn't even finish developing until the mid-20s, and the mind continues to develop throughout life. There are constant experiences and data points you need to consider when figuring out where you would add most value in the world. Chances are by the age of 16, 17, when you have to make such decisions, you haven't experienced enough of life to make life-changing decisions. Use your childhood as hints and inputs, but don't hold yourself to try and become someone you no longer are. For example, me, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a journalist. But if you gave me a job to say, okay, you're going to be the editor of the Times, I would hate it. I'd be bored out of my brain. So asking the question, who do you want to be, is a way better question, because then you look at other aspects that make up, the human and the character. So the school system. So this is, as I said, it all starts young. What we're all subject to is 13 years of schooling and then 4 years of university if you've been, and 80-90% of that is brainwashing indoctrination. Because you have to remember the objective is to produce obedient cogs for the status quo by the dissemination of state ideology. That means it's actually against their agenda to produce sort of free-thinking people who are kind of on their purpose, etc. Right? That's not going to happen if you go through the school system. Remember, the reason why everyone thinks pretty much the same way is because, again, we've all been indoctrinated in this way. So that's why we all believe highly in capitalism, in democracy is being the only way, in secularism, because that these philosophies are shaping students' views worldwide. And even if you go into the East, they have the American school system there and the British school system there, and they're the schools that have got status and a value that people aspire to go to. So that's what's shaping their worldview as well. Throughout various subjects, especially science, we're taught that physical reality is all that exists, and that every phenomenon can be explained by physical factors. belief in the supernatural is an undermined, and that weakens Iman because which is associated with the ghaib, the unseen. So obviously we're seeing the impact of that. We're seeing the dilution, desecration, and death of religion and spirituality amongst youth. Schools are actively promoting empiricism, the idea that knowledge is primarily derived from the sensory experiences, and we end up believing that knowledge is only observable by our senses or explained by science, even if it's something within the ground, something that should be rejected. Or if we can't, seeing is believing basically. If we can't explain it, then we're not sure about it. In history and anthropology, progress is emphasized. So the notion that humanity as a whole has become increasingly rational, moral, and advanced over time. So it creates a false impression that modern people are more advanced, more moral, more rational than previous generations, and therefore Islam of the 7th century, for example, that's out of date, that requires revision. And this concept of progress also instills the belief that morality and the law must evolve over time. So what they say our purpose is, or should be, is, again, like with everything, it's money driven, it's economic. A man is a rational, self-interested homo economicus, who is in a state of perpetual competition due to the scarcity of resources, and whose life goal is to maximize his material utility from the consumption of goods and services. In doing so, it attacks the essence of what Islam emphasizes so heavily: compassion, selflessness, and concern for others. Again, in a simple language, it's saying that man's purpose essentially is just to become a good citizen and make as much money as possible, and get the best job you can. Essentially, that's what it's kind of. But it doesn't tell you the other side, which is to serve and to have concern for others. It's what me. That's what the doctrine of capitalism actually is all about. Allama Iqbal, who I've quoted quite extensively, he was very critical of the Western education system as well. He was saying it's devoid of religion, morality, and spirituality. And this is a really good poem that he wrote. The modern age is your angel of death, deprived you of soul by giving you anxiety for bread. Your schooling has estranged you from lofty ideas that forbade the mind from toiling at evasion. Nature endowed you with a falcon's sight. Slavery stuffs a wren's eyes in your sockets. The school has hidden from them all secrets that are laid bare in the solitude of hill and desert. I mean, it's really interesting, like some of the stuff that he's saying. He's saying that nature, our fitra, essentially has given us the ability to see far, but like slavery has blinded us essentially, and the school system has hidden from us the secrets that are naturally available to us. So and it's estranged you from lofty ideas, meaning that it doesn't want you to think too big. It wants you just to think within the box that they give us, essentially. So, but again, just compare and contrast to how the school system worked in Islam. So teach the creation about their creator before you teach them the more difficult things such as prayer, fasting, charity, and pilgrimage. Teach them the easy things such as knowing their Lord. If the creation love their creator, everything else becomes easier. This was the initial call of the prophets. They called their people to Allah. Ultimately, everything is centered in Allah, right? The need to know Allah came first. So he was front and center. The very first lesson a 6-year-old got at Islamic school in the Golden Age was the 99 names of Allah, how to write them and what each of them mean. Because the real education cannot begin without knowing your Lord. And that's truly beginning with the end in mind. Because if you learn about him, everything else has meaning thereafter. So the gateway for them to understand the world was through the lens of Allah, essentially. So to give you an example, Al-Khaliq, which means the creator. So that means that he's created everything around us so we can see. So you can say, the trees, Al-Khaliq created the trees, and so he's all powerful, Al-Qahar. Okay, what does power mean? So they understand our core concepts derived from the understanding of Allah. This is a really good quote from the Secrets of Divine Love, a famous book. Everything in creation is created from the unique recipe of Allah's names. Similar to how physical matter is broken apart into chemical elements that are organized into a periodic table. The divine names form a table in the spiritual dimension that allow us to experience an infinite God, one name at a time. So it's I'm just talking about foundation stuff here. So just the fact that they start with knowing Allah before anything else, it just shows the how would our worldview be different if we had that mentality. So distracting ourselves with pleasure. So I want to now take you through a second experiment. So this is a rat. This is Dr. Bruce Alexander, who created something called Rat Park in 1978 to 81. So what he did is put a rat in a cage and give it 2 water bottles. One is just water, and one is water laced with heroin or cocaine. The rat will almost always prefer the drugged water and almost always kills itself in a couple of weeks. So that was how the theory of addiction kind of works, or traditionally worked. What Bruce did, so Dr. Bruce, he said, you know what's happening is that we're putting the rat in an empty cage, so he's bored, he's got nothing else to do. Let's do it a little bit differently. So what he did was he built something called Rat Park, which is like, Jannah for rats, right? So everything a rat could want is in Rat Park. Really amazing food, coloured balls, other rats to friend, etc. Right? And so now, so put water bottles in there, one with water, one with like drugs in it. But what was interesting is that not one rat went near the drugged water. They all just preferred the plain water. None of them overdosed, and so no one got addicted. No one looked like compulsive or anything. So what that showed us is that it's not, a lot of this stuff was boredom, and addiction is largely an adaptation to the environment. If the environment is set up for you to sort of fail, or you would go on and drown the toilet. But if the environment is a good, healthy, enjoyable society, then you would be fine. So what's happened for us today is that we've created a society where a lot of us cannot be able to be present in our lives without being on something. So drink, drugs, sex, shopping. Our society is hyper-consumist, hyper-individualist, and isolated. And so that's like the first cage. So the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is actually connection. Because in that second cage, there was lots of friends, and there's lots of connection, and lots of like things to speak to and do, and a beautiful environment, and grassy areas, and all that kind of stuff. So what's happening? Yeah. So what happened overall is that they were not in. The first cage was horrible. It was empty. It was boring, and so they had no choice just to go to the addiction. So yeah. So that's essentially what the second experiment was about in Rat Park. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. So obviously, as we mentioned earlier, societal narratives has kind of dictated us how to live, be, think, feel, and do, right? And we've come to trust this external guidance more than our internal God-given intuition. So often we make choices and lead lives that are not a reflection of our true selves. And to survive this, we have to find a way of coping. And naturally, life's hard. We have to go through tough tests all the time. But what's happening is that we are sometimes not complaining. Like, life's hard. We're not. Sometimes people are not even complaining. They're just turning to something to end their suffering or to end their boredom. Something that just can take the pain away. That's why we're watching Netflix, or we're gaming, or just addicted to social media, or gambling, or even sugar. Right, all of these things exist, and we're just consuming them to a dangerous level because it's our way of escaping drudgery and pain and boredom. It's like we're escaping that first park, or the first empty cage, basically, of the rat. When you don't want to suffer, you will do anything and even give up your freedom to take away the pain. So this is a really good quote from Dostoevsky. If you can't endure suffering, then you're not free. You're a slave to whatever will protect you from suffering. So what he does in this book, he compares two different types of people. There's worldly people and there's monks. Worldly people are those that are slaves to pleasure, and because of that they lose their freedom. The monks, on the other hand, give up the pursuit of pleasure, and because of that they keep their freedom intact. So that's what's happened to us. We're addicted. But the reason why we're struggling is because nothing really makes sense, and what we're doing, we're lacking meaning. And so the reason why people in the past could handle suffering and handle trials and difficulty, because their faith provided them with meaning. That, okay, look, if you suffer, Allah will support you, Allah will help you. Yeah, the reason the more you suffer, the more benefit you'll get, or the more reward you'll get. Except the point of it is that faith, or they had something that provided them with a reason for the suffering, and that allowed them to endure it, even if they don't know the exact reason they're going through it. So that's essentially the formula. Like, if you've got faith and that there's a reason, meaning for suffering, you'll be able to endure it no matter how, even if you don't know what the reason is. And then you'll not be trying to escape it, and then you won't become a slave to pleasure or comfort. And then that way you'll retain your freedom. And then you'll be able to do, serve any idea you want, unless, rather than someone else. But if you had no faith, let's say, that means that your suffering has no meaning. That means that it makes no sense to endure it. And it makes perfect sense to escape from it through pleasure and comfort. But when tragedy strikes, then when you lose the pleasure and comfort you built for yourself, you'll end up surrendering your freedom to the first person who can offer you pleasure and comfort. So this is why we are going for the cocaine water, essentially, or we're addicted to just pleasure, because it just allows us to forget the world that we live in and the darkness. In God, there is no sorrow or suffering or affliction. If you want to be free of all affliction and suffering, hold fast to God and turn wholly to Him and to no one else. Indeed, all your suffering comes from this, that you do not turn toward God and no one else. Imam al-Ghazali said that. And this is interesting because we talk about the cage that we're in, and society is actually continually feeding it and tempting us. Nabil Ravikant, who's again a Silicon Valley investor, he said the modern struggle. There's lone individuals summoning inhuman willpower, fasting, meditating, exercising. They're trying to be good and stay focused and disciplined. But they're up against armies of scientists and statisticians who are weaponizing abundant food, screens, medicine into junk food, clickbait news, infinite porn, endless games, addictive drugs. Again, so the struggle is real. It's really, really difficult. Even if you're trying to escape it, if you're trying to be disciplined, like, it's just around us, it bombards us. So now let's revisit the world. I told you this one was a little bit dark, but inshallah it'll get better. So revisit the world we live in today. So the third rat experiment. So there was a study in Harvard in the 50s. So this is Dr. Kurt Richter. So what he did was that he placed rats in a pool of water to test how long they could tread water. So how long could they swim for? On average, he found that they would give up around 15 minutes. So they would swim for about 15 minutes and eventually they'd just give up and drown. So then that was the first lot of rats. Then the second lot, he said, okay, you know what? With these ones, I'm going to test them. And at 14 minutes, so just before they're about to quit, and he would then pick them out and dry them off, let them rest for a few minutes, and then he would put them back in for a second round. So in the second try, how long do you think they lasted? Remember, they had just swam until failure only a few short minutes ago. So how long do you think? So, an average guess might be, another 5 minutes, maybe another 15 minutes, maybe even half an hour. But the answer actually is 60 hours. 60. All right, 60 hours. So what was so that's 60 hours of swimming just because they just summoned like superhuman strength or something. What's the reason? Or the conclusion was drawn that since the rats believed that they would eventually be rescued, they could push their bodies way past what they previously thought impossible. They had hope and they believed that the struggle would be worth it, so there was meaning behind their struggle. So what this shows is the power of hope and what we can physically, mentally and psychologically do if we have it. And that's why if it's destroyed, it can make us apathetic and weak. So Francis Fukuyama once wrote that we're living in the best of times. Obviously Elon Musk's always perpetuating this as well. We're living longer, we've got better technology, better health, better food. We've got AI now that can write for us, that can do artwork for us. We can travel anywhere we want. Internet is connected to the entire world. But is that really the case when you go deeper? Right, let's take a step back and look at the normal world we live in. One quote I just want to read before that is, this is from Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. He was comparing Orwell, George Orwell, and Aldous Huxley, and they both were dystopian writers. And what he was saying was that what Orwell feared was that there was going to come a time where people would ban books. But what Huxley feared is that there would be no reason to ban a book because there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared that there would be those who would deprive us of information, but Huxley feared that there would be those who would give us so much of it that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that truth would be concealed from us, and Huxley feared that the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Orwell feared that we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared that we would become a trivial culture. In 1984, Orwell added, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, which is Huxley's book, they are controlled by inflicting pleasure. In short, Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us. Maybe Huxley, not Orwell, was right. So that was an interesting insight into the world we live in today, right? So anyway, so let's go into a bit more about what we see. So first of all, we do see the kind of the death of religion. Secularism is a dominant force. Religion is dying. Seeing is believing, and immorality as a result is rife, especially amongst the youth. So we live in that you only live once type of age, right? And we're championing mental and emotional health versus spiritual health, right? We're seeing this massive dumbing down of society, short attention span, celebrity culture, gossiping, prank, or just mindless stuff. Success is seen as those who have most money or best career or most followers. So we're constantly competing for attention. Individualism and ego has never been as championed as it is now. It's an age of mass distraction and addiction to entertainment, news, porn, dopamine, food, drugs, alcohol, and technology. Image is everything. Huge increase in pagan practices. So we're having this whole spiritual but not religious. A lot of people, especially on TikTok, we're having this they call it witch talk, people manifesting things in the universe and doing hexes and curses and nihilism and satanism and do what thou wilt, and it's crazy. A mental health crisis, self-harm, depression, suicide at the highest rates ever. Health is often economically driven, right? So again, it's not necessarily what who can pay more and do all that stuff. How many medicines can we prescribe you, etc. And obesity again is even though we're living in the time of the best of health apparently, but obesity has never been as much as it is today. There's no certainty or stability, even in what was once indisputable binary facts, so like even gender. That's no longer stable. There's mass confusion, there's corruption, there's disconnect. People are divided. There's censorship, sensitivity, cancel culture, toxicity, this red pill masculinity and ultra feminism, which is rampant, and that's resulting in the family unit being broken and destroyed. Extreme capitalism in every sphere, interest, debt, monetary collapse, inflation, energy crisis. The wealth gap has never been as big as it is today. Sectarianism, division, extremism, less tolerance of the other, mass shooting, desensitization to evil as well. So we're hearing so much about it that it's kind of, we're like meh about it now. Obviously gaslighting and the mass manipulation and bombarded with bad news, advertising everywhere, fake news, information overload. Sacred is mocked, secularism and scientism is elevated above all. Materialism, consumerism, the causes are, even the causes that have validity, they're often then co-opted and then they kind of just lose all meaning, like BLM. We're on the verge of World War III, so there's nuclear talk and geopolitics and very dangerous situation, Russia, Middle East, China, India. So basically we are far, far, far from fitra, from order and from nature. There's no inner peace, there's no balance, there's no justice, there's no order, there's no happiness. There's just chaos. So this is how we are. We're bombarded by corruption, crisis, chaos. This is we're like a punch-struck boxer and we're getting punched from every single angle, whether it's psychological, social, spiritual, cultural, environmental. We don't know where to turn. And what do you think this is doing us for our hope? If we said that hope is able to give us superhuman strength, this is why they feel like there's no hope. All the stuff's going on. But Allah reminds us in the Quran, the Prophet Ibrahim he said, who can lose hope in the mercy of his Lord except those who have lost a straight path? So again, all this stuff, it bombards you so you forget, so you get heedless. The lack of meaning in life is a soul sickness whose full extent and import our age has not yet begun to comprehend. If you feel that life has got no meaning, then your suffering's not worth it. You've lost all hope. Like, what is the point? You're just existing, and then it leads to societal collapse, etc. So all these things are interlinked. And Allah also said, "I'm as my servants expect me. If he thinks good of me, he will have it. If he thinks evil of me, he will have it." So again, if people lose hope in God, then they're thinking evil of him. What will they have? What's their return? And God again reminds us: do not lose heart nor fall into despair. Do not lose heart or fall into despair. You shall triumph if you are believers. So this is the promise Allah has made us. It's cast iron. It's in the Quran that if we retain our hope, we shall always triumph. So just to summarize these rat experiments, what can we learn? So what did we learn? We learned from John Calhoun in the Universe 25 experiment what lack of purpose does to society. So I'll give you an example of this. In Japan, they have this subsect of society called the herbivores. Right, the herbivores are kind of men who are maybe 30 to 50, who are still living at home, who are still just gaming. They're just addicted to porn. They've got no interest at all in getting married, having girlfriends, procreating, anything at all. So as a result, women are frustrated. They are then paying for this stuff. They just invested then fully in their careers. And men are just emasculated, and they just got no sense of desire at all. And so, but what's happened as a result of that is they say that Japan's population is a crisis, and by 2050, they go that it's likely to halve. So that's kind of what happens, when you talk about when you see this stuff playing out. Then we see Dr. Bruce Alexander in Rat Park. So why we're all addicts today? We're far from fitra. We live in a horrid environment aimed at disorder. So we're turning to desires to drown our sorrows and numb our pain. Whereas if you contrast to an Islamic society, obviously one of the core principles of Islam is beauty. And because the reason for that is beauty begets beauty. So if you are in a beautiful environment, then you will do beautiful actions. That's why everything, in the garden, they would build any building. They'd have huge gardens, and they'd have amazing architecture, etc. Because beauty begets beauty, and garden cities, etc. And even if you look at how they've subverted art, so now modern art often is horrible. And they just say, art's subjective, etc. But obviously, our fitra recognize what beauty is. So, but what is beautiful today are the advertisements, right? So we're naturally drawn towards advertising, but we're obviously associating this modern art as art, but then it's going to be we're not going to recognize that how we're being played in that sense. And what we learn from swimming rats is that why meaning and hope are vital to our existence. What nihilism does, which is there's no meaning. Atheism, obviously there's no God, so there's no hope, etc. And all these other isms is that there's the constant promotion of meaninglessness, right? So it's the erosion of hope. This is why we have a snowflake generation, increase of suicide. Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, he was a prisoner in the Nazi camp. And again, one of the core things from that book is the fact that what helped him to survive was that the suffering that he's going through it's for a reason. It's for a reason. So I think he was a big proponent of what's called logotherapy, and this is he gave an example where someone he had a client, because he eventually became a therapist, and so he had a client whose wife had died. So he was obviously distraught. And he basically just couldn't. He said, "I can't do anything. I can't move. I can't think. I can't do anything." And then he asked him the question. He said, when did your wife die?" He goes, "About 6 months ago." He goes, have you thought about what would happen if she had died first? So that one question, he made him think. He said, she would never be able to handle it. I was her everything. I was a rock. I did everything for her, etc. So she goes, maybe that's why she was taken first. And then basically he goes that the guy just got his hat on, got his coat on, got his scarf, and walked out. He shook my hand and walked out. Basically, that's all he needed was some meaning behind this, and that kind of led him to survive. So it took me 30 years to figure out that trying to fit into a dysfunctional society always caused me more pain than staying true to my core values. There's no benefit in destroying your human potential just so a dysfunctional society accepts you. So this was a self-sabotage expert called Jason Christoph. So again, very interesting that we are living in a dysfunctional society and we're trying to fit in, but we're eroding our own soul by trying to do that. So what's the overall summary of what's happened is that God is no longer front and center in our lives, so that's why we're completely out of sync. And Allah has put in the Quran, He raised the heavens and set everything in balance, mizan, so that you would not exceed the balance. Therefore maintain just measure and do not transgress the balance. That is the key. That is the key to existence, essentially. And because we're a world out of balance and equilibrium, instead of us being on fitrah and order, by being on balance, which this is where goodness, flow, justice, truth, peace and serenity, progress, strength, hope, and it's godly. Instead of that world, which is what we've saw from the past, in the age of the Sahaba and the Golden Age, etc., we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing facade, corruption, immorality, apathy, injustice, falsehood, war, disruption, decline, weak, despair, and satanic. We're in fawda, basically chaos. So this has led to this. We are essentially either one of these two things. We're either a jasad or a jellyfish. A jasad, which is an Arabic word that means body, is just an automaton, a slave, a body without a mind or soul, programmed to follow orders and serve the status quo. So you are, or we're a jellyfish, so a creature who's slave to society. So we might know that, oh, you know what, this is not really what we want to do. We hate our jobs, etc. But we're just escaping by doing meaningless stuff, nothing of value, consuming data, dopamine, food, entertainment, news. We're addicted to pleasure and avoiding pain or action. So that's what the impact of all of this stuff. Society has programmed most people to become either one of these two things. Purposeless people are either a jasad, a zombie, an autopilot going with the flow, a limp body not in control of mind or soul, controlled by algorithms and predictable, or a jellyfish. So a jellyfish, the reason why they're saying jellyfish, by the way, is because they've actually taken over the ocean. They're multiplying record numbers, which is sea life in society. So a jellyfish actually does nothing but consume. It's mindless, it's spineless, it's always eating. And today we have human equivalents, basically always consuming, procreating. They don't think properly, they don't take action, they're addicted to their nafs. So the difference between the two, one can't take action and one won't take action. One's an addict to pleasure, escaping pain. Doesn't really know the difference because he's been programmed a certain way and can't see the light. In an over-organized society, the individual is altogether crushed out of existence. He gains the whole wealth of social thought around him and loses his own soul. I think this is what's happened. People have lost their soul because the systems and culture is too strong, and it's in the osmosis has kind of pervaded in every aspect of our life. But obviously it's not supposed to be like this. We have not revealed the Quran to you so that you should be miserable. The millions are awake enough for physical labour, but only 1 in a million is awake enough for effective intellectual exertion, and only 1 in 100 million to a divine life. To be awake is to be alive. So a divine life is actually what we're after. That's what we need to keep going. So the purpose of purpose. So what does being fit for purpose mean? It's living up to the reason you were made. It means performing a function. So for example, if, like say, this chair that I'm sitting on, if it wasn't fit for purpose, you'd get rid of it. And so it's just even that, this is just an introduction, but humans and jinn are the only creatures that don't fulfill their purpose. So what purpose obviously also does, it give meaning to your life. So that meaning, as we established, is no significance or hope. It simplifies your life so you know what to focus on. Does this activity fulfill my purpose or not? Yes or no. So you can make decisions very easily. It focuses your energy. So obviously human nature is to get distracted. There's so many temptations around us. Shaitan's forever trying to leave us astray. With that purpose, you'll keep changing direction, pivoting, and before you know it, life will have passed you by. It produces mindfulness and keeps you grounded, centered, and God conscious. It aligns you, holds you accountable, and makes you happy at all times, no matter the circumstances. When you're going through difficulty, you say Alhamdulillah. When you're going through good times, you say Alhamdulillah. Right? Sabr and shukr. It motivates and energizes your life. It always produces passion. Right? There's a quote, George Bernard Shaw. This is the true joy of life, being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. Being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clot of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. it can lead you to great heights and achievements that you never thought possible. And inshallah, through this program, you'll see. So another thing that the sense of purpose gives you. Let me give you an example. So imagine a dilapidated house on fire. It's surrounded by spiky nettles, barbed wire, and vicious attack dogs. If I said to you, I'm going to give you $10, go inside that house, you'd say, no, of course not. If I gave you $100 or $1,000, even $10,000, you'll say, no, of course not. But if I said, oh look, a loved one inside, your child or your parent or someone you care about, you won't hesitate. You'll say, you know what, you just go without thinking. And that's what having a deep sense of purpose actually gives you. It gives you this deep drive, sense of urgency, that a will that you never thought you actually had in you. Another example I often use is, can you lift up a car? Honestly, most people can't. Well, everyone can't. But now if I imagine the same example, if your child is stuck under it, no, it doesn't mean that you have superhuman strength and now you can lift it up. No, but because it will give you that deep sense of focus, it'll give you resourcefulness and a never say die spirit, because it just ensure that you need to, like, there's no choice, you have to lift up the car to save your child. So you'll find a stick and then create a lever with it, or you knock on every neighbour's door frantically and get 10 people to help you lifting it. Basically, you'll find a way because there's no other choice, and that's the point. That urgency and that drive, and that's what a deep sense of purpose gives you. It gives you urgency. So there might be criticism, there might be self-doubt, and obviously everything's going to have huge obstacles, but you still do it without hesitation. I remember, when in the early days of No, I would go to certain conferences and stuff, and then there were all these famous scholars speaking there, like, big name ones and stuff. And before, I would never kind of go up to someone and approach them or anything like that. But as soon as, because there's a reason to speak to them, I'll be the first on stage. Oh, assalamu alaikum, my name's this. I'll be really interested in inviting you to speak with us. It was just crazy. It's like someone flicked a button overnight, and so it's just interesting how it changes. So your objective. So nearly done. So your objective: take care of yourself. How to take care of yourself in the world that we live in today. So Allah says in chapter 5, "O you who believe, take care of your own selves." So then there was like some commentary on it by in a hadith. I came to Abu Thalaba al-Khushani and said, "How do you understand this verse?" He said, "Which verse? O you who believe, take care of your own selves." And then he said, "You've asked one who knows about it. I asked the Messenger of Allah." And he said, "Enjoin good upon one another and forbid one to do evil. But if you see overwhelming stinginess, desires being followed, this world being preferred to the hereafter, every person with an opinion feeling proud of it, hashtag Twitter, and you realize that you have no power to deal with it, then you have to mind your own business and leave the common folk to their own devices. After you will come days of patience, but during which patience will be like grasping a burning ember, and one who does good deeds will have a reward like that of 50 men doing the same deed." That means, the reason for this here is because now we've seen the world and what it's doing and the impact, etc. And you need to now take care of yourself as per this ayat and this hadith. Forget what everyone else is doing. Just be patient, focus on your own new path. So this is what taking care of yourself now looks like. And this again, just as a reminder of all the noise around you. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf once said that all of fitna is from 3 sources: newscasters, which are those spreading news; news hounds, those seeking news; and consumers of news, those consuming news. And none of them are free from blame. By the nature of the time that we're in the age of immense fitna. So cling to your home, cling to your purpose, and do not worry about news that does not concern you. So that's the thing I would say to you. Put your filters on, forget everything from that's going on around you, forget the past, forget everything, and let's begin this new chapter fully focused and with the best of intentions, inshallah. Talking of intentions, it's narrated from Umar bin Khattab, I heard the messenger say, "Actions are according to intentions, and everyone will get what was intended." So whoever migrates with an intention for Allah and His Messenger, the migration will be for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. Whoever migrates for worldly gain or to marry a woman, then his migration will be for the sake of whatever he migrated for. So this is Hadith 1 of Imam Nawawi's famous collection. Basically, intention is everything, right? And it's something that's to do with purpose. They go hand in hand. Purpose is the why, and intention is the action. So the point here is that we need to have the right intention in mind. We need to have that, look, we want to do this, A, to take care of ourselves, for the akhirah, all that kind of stuff. Because if you do, then every single second that you spend even thinking about this program, it will be considered a form of worship for you, and you'll be acquiring good deeds. So I just want to put this again in day one, because intentions are very, very important, and to start with the right one is vital. So the modern world promotes the pathological pursuit of physical pleasure, as we've seen, but Islam promotes prayer, perspicuity, purity, peace, and purpose. Perspicuity, I think, is like clarity and so. So I like that because I love illustration, but again, I think it summarizes things very nicely. So that's it for this one. The action item is obviously, again, purify your intentions. Make intention that you're starting this program for the right reasons, to get closer to Him and to take care of yourself. And then complete the worksheet 1, which will help you understand your main issues and to affirm your commitment to the process, inshallah. And to end is, I learned that every mortal shall taste death, but only a handful will truly taste life. By Rumi. And inshallah, that's the end for this one, and I'll see you on the next one.